Okay, being that it is 6 o'clock, I'm going to call the Coos Bay City Council a joint work session to order. Will you please all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And Rob, will you please lead us in that?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you to those who are attending as well as attending virtually this evening. I just want to remind everyone that this is a work session, so no formal decisions will be made on actions that are discussed in tonight's meeting. We do have Mayor Benetti online, and we will not have Councilor Matthews, Councilor Stevens, or Councilor Cribbins, thank you, with us this evening. So with that said, I'm going to make one slight change to the agenda tonight. I'm going to add to the agenda the city manager report and councilor comments at the beginning of the meeting. Going forward, this will be at the beginning of every work session. The intent behind this is that the city manager or the council can give comments that may be pertinent to discuss at the work session with staff. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to give us an update.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do is take tonight as an opportunity to just kind of update the mayor and city council on the last pilot. So when I speak of pilot, I'm talking about our coordinated homeless response office, the last pilot board meeting. Just kind of backtracking a little bit, council made a decision at the March 5th council meeting to not pursue purchase of a property for a potential relocation of the Devereaux Center. And that was due entirely to a funding issue and a shortfall of what we believed to be available funding. So following that, the coordinated office decided to push out those dollars to local service providers. And so what ended up occurring is at our last pilot meeting, we had two of those local service providers come forward with proposals in ways that they would be able to use those dollars for projects that they believed would meet the grant requirements. And I first would start with saying that this was kind of clarified with OHCS as a good plan of attack to make sure that we were, OHCS, I should clarify, that's Oregon Housing and Community Services, and they are essentially like the overall administrator of that grant at the state's level, pass through to this specific pot of dollars, pass through to North Bend as the fiscal agent. So at that pilot meeting, the first thing I would say is we unfortunately didn't get that advertised, meeting the public meeting standards, so we were unable to make any decisions at that meeting. However, we can listen and learn those kinds of things. That's what we took advantage of. At that meeting, two entities made proposals, the Devereaux Center and alternative youth activities. Those, of course, were presented to us live in that meeting, getting the first opportunity to see what the details in those proposals were. Because we couldn't make any decisions, that's kind of where that meeting landed. And from that, we discussed a better plan of attack would be those entities work with Oregon Housing and Community Service to truly vet their proposal before it would come back again for us to be able to take action. That way we make sure we've met all grant requirements. We have no question on funding. So that's where we closed out the pilot meeting. Given our decision, the council's decision to backtrack from property purchase earlier, and just kind of the decision to step away and back from that, I felt like we had a reason to comment on where our stance was, because I believed from the decision was that our hope was the Devereaux Center would contemplate ways in which they can look at their current site for some improvements. I think specifically some things that came out in our meeting was some security fencing and also 24/7 on-site security. So given that those things were kind of in limbo, I spoke last Friday with Tara and said that I understood that it was very possible this council would likely struggle with support of another relocation while we're still waiting to see how the current location kind of falls out. So I just wanted to share that, where we were at from the pilot perspective. I also understand from my conversation with Tara that she has intention to come back at the next pilot meeting and withdraw her proposal. So I guess I'd leave if there's any questions, and also I'd share, just so we have an understanding, there's two of us who attend those meetings. Drew was there too, so if I missed anything, please fill those gaps.
Can you take us through how it's structured, how that pilot works? Because there's some information out there that there was a collaboration of councils to do this, but there is an actual process that doesn't involve the councils necessarily initially up front.
Yeah, and I actually have one slide, kind of knowing that we potentially would have the option for me to share tonight.
Great.
If you go to slide 2, hopefully you guys can see this well enough. What I just wanted to, from this perspective, is just start out with the homeless response pilot was established by the state. There's 8 of them across the state of Oregon, and it is there is an advisory board that has oversight for that homeless response office, and that board is comprised of the 3 entities who entered into an agreement in order to qualify for House Bill 4123 funding. That's Coos County, Coos Bay, and North Bend, and I'm sorry, those names are ridiculously small. But essentially each entity appointed 2 members from their entity. Thankfully, I'm not sure the people appointed included both an elected official and then a staff member. So it's a nice balancing across each entity. Commissioner Sweet is with Coos County, and also David Geels. He is a behavioral health director at Coos Health and Wellness. For Coos Bay, Councilor Farmer was appointed, and myself. At the time, I wasn't city manager, but, and then for North Bend, Mayor Engelke and the city administrator, David Milliron. And so that board is the body who makes decisions related to the funding received. Now, of course, we would hope that each of those individuals have an idea of how their overall governing body would wish those decisions to be made. But it does come down to that body of 6 people making those decisions for that homeless response pilot. And then I would just add, like, a portion of House Bill 4123 said we needed to create a homeless response office. And so we have staffing in that office. We have a director, a project manager, and an admin coordinator. And then the last little piece that I would hope add that maybe adds a little bit of clarity here. So Coos County came in as the fiscal agent under House Bill 4123, so that first initial funding. And then North Bend has agreed to carry the second batch of funding as the fiscal agent.
And why do they appoint a fiscal agent?
So essentially what needs to happen is the state of Oregon needs to have an entity that they contract with as a subgrantee to receive the funds. That fiscal agent will do all of the requests for funds and the reporting required under the grant. And so there needs to be an entity who is responsible for those elements. At the time when we first did the first HB 4123, the county started this process, and they, offered up fiscal agent responsibility. And the second go around, we did have a conversation who best to kind of manage that. And our team here at the city was down a staff member, and I just felt like that was probably not the best decision here. And North Bend stepped up. So I share the wealth, I guess, a little bit, so we each have a little piece of the pie. But
Nicole, can you also, I think it's still confusing for some in terms of where this funding comes from. I think that people still think that these are city dollars. And can you just clarify one more time for us and for any of those that are watching that these are not city dollars and how those dollars came about?
Sure. So the first House Bill 4123 was actually under the previous governor. It was an apportionment that she did to support those 8 pilots across the state of Oregon. And then the second, which is not identified up there, but House Bill 5019, which was recently passed, and again, related to an executive order, a direct governor appointment of funds came through there. Those are all state dollars. They're going to come pass through to each of those fiscal agents.
Great. Drew, I don't know if you want to say anything. I do want to, for the record, I appreciate that you do have a real sense of how this council is going to vote, and given the proposal that we saw after the fact, because we did not know any of this information before that meeting, we wouldn't, I believe I can speak for the councilors and for the mayor, we wouldn't have supported that. I think there is still work to do at the Devereaux Center, and I'm really pleased that the Devereaux Center is considering fencing and considering 24-hour security. Ultimately, I think we all need to be reminded that they are their own business, and I think there's still some confusion that the city has the ultimate authority to decide how they run their operation, and that is not the case. But we are excited that they are considering some of the recommendations that this council has brought to them, that others in this community have brought to them, and so I really am appreciative that they are taking those under consideration, and hopefully we will see some real change soon. Drew, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So, of course, I was at the meeting too, and the site that was proposed, that was a new proposal. I disclosed at the meeting, I know who owns the property. It's somebody that I've known for years. But I stopped by and talked to Tara actually yesterday, I think it was, about the Devereaux Center. We talked about some ways that it could maybe be a better neighbor, proactively engage some issues, let folks know that, sometimes folks are there because serving warrants and such. But the premise around this particular property, I let her know it wouldn't be something I could support. I liked the other site because it was farther away from residences and schools, and this particular site is across the street from houses, trailer park, and directly abuts in the back a assisted living facility, which is roughly across the street from a series of apartments that house folks that are of compromised faculties. So the site that was proposed, I understand the logic. She thought the property could be recessed farther back. It's a more favorable plot to build on, and it has the potential, because one of her concerns, I know, is the folks that are on the street corner where they're at right now, she doesn't control when they're on the sidewalk, and it bothers her that the perception is there that she does. So her thought with this property was that they could recess farther back, create this buffer zone where she does have control to ensure people weren't camping right there against the property. But because of its location, it's just not an improvement, a substantial or sufficient improvement in my eyes. So I let her know it wouldn't work for me.
Thank you, Drew. Mayor Benetti, do you have any comments to make on the topic?
No, I don't. Thank you, though.
Okay. Councilor Kilmer.
I would just say that I could not have supported that either. I've been a longtime resident of Empire, and I was actually there when the Ayers building was functioning as apartments, and also when the Mission was there. And I had young children. I remember deciding to go down the rescue mission side of the street with my baby in the stroller. So I understand. I just could not have supported that. I think it was just moving it. I understand, as Drew explained, why the thought process was for that, but I could not have supported that. I just have one more question, and it's about how these funding dollars work. They were not just intended for one particular item, were they? They can be used only for certain things.
Yeah, so the second amount of money, I mean, the first, well, both. They both came with parameters. So the first, the House Bill 4123, had some specific guidelines establishing the coordinated homeless response so that we are creating some coordination in our community, and then also creating a position to kind of direct that and a strategic plan. So those elements clearly defined.
Be roaming at that point.
Great, thank you for that clarification, Drew. If there are no further comments on that matter, and there are no other comments from the council, I will proceed to the next agenda item, which is discussion regarding the 4th Street and Anderson Avenue development opportunity. And I think, Nicole, you're going to be talking about that?
Yeah, so I'll start us out, but Chelsea's really done a lot of work in this space, so she can, much like Drew did, kind of fill in those gaps. So several years ago, the lot at the corner of 4th and Anderson, it's the old fire station lot, was actually put out on the streets, request for a proposal for development. We worked with South Coast Development Council to develop that proposal and kind of work through that process. Unfortunately, the proposals that we received just didn't kind of fit the vision of what we thought downtown at the time was going to aid and add to our downtown experience. And so we kind of left that there on the table. And we're just coming back to this again. One, because I think Chelsea's had a number of developers kind of inquiring, what is that lot sitting there for? What could be done there? And so that kind of started us thinking again, like, should we contemplate what this looks like? With the new director at the South Coast Development Council, we've gotten some feedback of ways that we could lift this property's interest so that hopefully we'd have a bigger response. And then some things we can be doing in advance that would come up typically from a developer questioning some elements about the lot. So things like a survey could be done, an appraisal. And then we had some conversations just internally about should we do some just site marketing, which would include some signage and maybe even kind of closing off that space so that it would be ready for walkthroughs and things like that. So we are working on some of those, as well as refining that RFP that we issued previously. And before we kind of add those finishing touches to it, we just wanted to get some feedback on where you see this property being put back to use for the community, what kind of things you might like to see there. So when we develop that proposal to go out, we have an idea of what kind of things we should be looking for. So I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to add, Chelsea.
No, not right now. I just, I guess I'll just relay, if you don't already know, it is in our downtown mixed use zone where you can have commercial, residential, variety of uses. It's also in our downtown parking district where off-street parking is not required for any of the uses in that area. It is, let's see, it's in the enterprise zone, which allows for tax. It's kind of a tax incentive program for developers. It is in a floodplain, but with new development, it's much easier to meet floodplain development standards rather than you have an existing building and you're trying to bring it up to code. And I think, as everybody knows, it's at a really heavily trafficked intersection and highly visible, great location, so we'd love to see it activated, developed.
I think that's great. Mayor Benetti or councilors, do you have any comments in regards of how you would like this property to ultimately be used?
I was.
Yes, I do.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. So first of all, though, I guess Chelsea or Nicole, are we going to get a geotech report on this? Because I think it's going to be important for a developer to have that in place, have an idea of what, the status is on that. And the other thing, would this meet the MUPD if there was multifamily residential units there?
Mayor Benetti, would you mind repeating the first part of your question? We couldn't hear very
Sure.
well.
So geotech, do we have a geotech report for the first, for that lot?
I don't believe we have a geotech report at this time. I don't believe we've gotten one.
Are we planning on getting one to go out for the RFP? I think it would be beneficial to a developer to have that in hand. I don't know what's entailed to get one either, though.
Yeah, so right now we are working on an Alta survey and an appraisal, I believe. A geotech, I understand where you're coming from. Nobody has brought that up yet. Certainly probably something we can do. Jim maybe knows more about the soils at that location, maybe?
Well, it's fill, so it's something that would have to be done either by a future developer or it could be done in advance. But it would just be an investigation of the soils. The person purchasing the land would probably still have to do additional work from a geotechnical standpoint to have something specific to what they're going to ultimately construct.
To Mayor Benetti's point, though, I think that it would be, if we're really, the first time we went through this process, we weren't able to, I think, find an appropriate use. And so if we did have, I'm talking as if I know what I'm talking about, and that's dangerous because, so I'm going to preface this, is there like an initial geotech report that we could get, not the one that's more detailed for the specific developer?
I would think so. I think we could get a soil investigation done.
Okay. Would that work for you, Mayor Benetti?
Oh, that'd be great. I just think it would help with the process. A developer comes in and looks at it. If they have everything completely understood what can be done there, it'd be would help market the facility. And also, how about the MUPD? I mean, if they had living spaces up above, my ideal thing would be have retail down below, residential up above. Of course, that would be the ideal thing. I think it would accommodate both. And then the residential is concerned. I mean, could they get a MUPD, the multiple tax advantage, for the 10 years that we're looking at doing or initiating?
And Nicole or Chelsea, could you remind the audience what MUFTI is?
Yes. So MUPD is a multi-unit property tax exemption, and we have intention to bring that before the council at this next meeting. I believe, based on what has been previously discussed, that absolutely could be something that would be available. Given that it's in an urban renewal district, I believe we landed comfortably with a 6-plex or larger, which I don't think would be problematic in a multifamily in that kind of space. So yeah, that would be another opportunity.
So does that impact the enterprise zone at all if we put a MUPD?
Gosh, I
Or
don't
is
know
it just
that
another option for
I
a
would-
developer?
I think they're just layers, but I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that they are layers, and we didn't add anything in our, or at least we are not proposing to add any prevention of using those layers.
Okay.
Drew, any comments?
Nope, I always like mixed-use commercial residential if it's going to be downtown, but other than that, I'm not picky.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Mayor Benetti's, if we could get that, that would be great. But I would like to see all the proposals to see what comes forward. So as part of that process, now that we've given you the feedback, what will happen next, Nicole?
So, I mean, again, Chelsea, if I'm misstepping here, I think we want to finalize that RFP, and obviously we want to have Nate look at that and see where we stand there. We can certainly bring that back to you for your review before we issue that. If not, if you choose not to look at that again, it would come back to you when proposals are received. So,
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
you said that you're working with Lexi Woodward over at
yes.
SCDC. Very knowledgeable and very familiar with this. And I was at a meeting earlier today, and those things that have been discussed here I've heard over and over from developers, and enticing developers to come to the coast to do that's pretty significant. I think this checks a lot of the boxes off. And she's very, very knowledgeable on that, so that's good.
We started on the path with the survey and the appraisal because she said if you have those in hand, those are two things they would do. And that the idea of tax incremental financing, which it's intended to use towards projects that better the community. I'm going to attempt over here. I forget it's the wrong way. Okay, next. Okay, yeah. So essentially when a community decides that they'd like to look at urban renewal for kind of redeveloping underdeveloped or blighted areas, one of the first things that is done is identification of those underdeveloped or blighted areas. And the specifics of that area, what kind of space in your community, what kind of acreage, those kinds of things. And then a plan is developed, and you outline in there the things that you think could happen to that area, and dollars are attached to that. And how this whole thing operates is on that total cost to implement that plan, which is referred to as maximum indebtedness. And so you have a maximum amount of tax incremental revenues, and we'll talk about what those are in a minute, that you are going to get over the life of that plan. Once done, once you've received those dollars, those things have been completed, you could essentially sunset that plan. It's a process that requires approval by overlapping taxing districts. So those are the districts that are within the area that you've designated who also have taxing authority for those properties in that area. It requires public hearings, and the creation of which creates a frozen tax base. And so that's just kind of walks us into what incremental tax increment is. So essentially when, as an example, the city established a urban renewal district in the downtown, and that was done in, what's my year there? In 1988. So in 1988, that area was established, and that frozen value was known then. What was the assessed value? At that point, that incremental increase in that value is what funds the plan. Now, we keep in mind that were the urban renewal not to be in place, that incremental increase would still occur. It would just be given to the overlapping taxing district. And so understanding that helps you understand that an urban renewal agency does not increase the taxes to the property owner. It just makes a change on where they're distributed. And again, all of the overlapping taxing districts have already approved the plan based on the benefits they understand the whole community would get. I think maybe go next. So there are some elements that are required. Urban renewal agencies still have to follow local budget law. That's a public process. It's much like any other municipality. There is an annual audit, just like the city has to undergo. And then there's a whole nother piece of the puzzle that urban renewal agencies have to follow is an annual report. And that is identified in ORS, the elements that need to be included in there, and that gets shared out to all those overlapping taxing districts. They see it's put on our website. We have to put a notice in the public, in a distributed paper, so that folks know that that's available, and they can go and look to see where we are at in the plan, the impacts to the districts, all of those things. Next. And then I just wanted to kind of give just a general idea, and this is data from the fiscal year 23, so July 1, 22 through June 30 of 23, and then it's kind of small numbers. So you can kind of see we have two areas, one in the downtown, one in Empire, that we've identified as our urban renewal districts. Those are the overlapping taxing districts, which are impacted by this urban renewal. And you can see the dollars in each district that they are foregoing, which then come to the urban renewal agency to implement the plan. You can see that the largest one who is foregoing those taxes is the city of Coos Bay, with the second being Coos Bay School District. And that might seem concerning to some because you look at that and say, wow, the school district loses $700, in last fiscal year, $700,000. But the thing about school districts is they are funded through the state school fund. And when they do their reporting, so the state establishes a per pupil cost. That's what it costs for them to provide an education to each student in their district. They report what are their local revenues that are generated, and the state fills that gap to make sure that they are getting that per pupil cost. So although they are not getting those dollars here locally, they are funded then by the state of Oregon to make sure that they are, and that was a process that was put in place years ago to make sure that rural communities had the same per pupil funding that metro communities have. We want all of our kids having access to the same funding.
Can I ask you a question?
You certainly can.
So what I think I hear you say is, so they're being funded, so that's $722,000, breaking it down about $433K for downtown and $289K for the Empire District. We can use those funds then to help support a blight in those two separate taxing districts. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so when you think about having to do some of the projects that we've identified in the plan, if we were to try to do that alone, at today's dollars, that a little over $1 million the city would have had if we didn't have the urban renewal, that becomes a little bit more challenging to do that. And there have been projects specifically that impact these districts directly in that. We've had a housing project that we supported in Empire that gives option for each of those people. I mean, we all know we have some housing challenges. So there is that buy-in initially to understand that if not for us coming all together, the pot wouldn't be large enough to attempt to rectify some of these blighted areas.
Thank you.
So also something that benefits the district's schools is the access. We've done some work on access issues for sidewalks.
Yes, a lot of the work in Empire, so there's a couple elements that are in both districts. One is facade, or now we've changed that to improvement program grants. And so those are ways that local businesses can benefit and increase that revenue, tax revenue. But beyond that, we've done some other, public infrastructure things. One of those was in Empire, a lot of sidewalk and also ADA kind of access points throughout the main thoroughfare in Empire. We also did 4th Street, those improvements there, the roadway and the sidewalks and crossing signal, flashing lights, all of that, part of that. And then another significant project that we supported recently, and I don't have the history to kind of grab some of these other ones historically, sure. But we helped support the traffic signal and rail crossing safety issues at Coos Bay Village. And for not for that whole development would not have happened, which has changed the way the waterfront looks. So.
Nicole, so for example, we were just talking about the Devereaux Center and their need for fencing around their building. I know there's probably other grant opportunities, but they have every opportunity to apply for a grant to get fencing around their property, and that would be paid by the urban renewal dollars in Empire. Is that correct?
They would have an option just like any other entity would to apply,
okay.
And that would come before, there's a couple pieces there. It comes before first the design assistance team. They review those applications first, and then that comes before the agency board. Yeah, and if there's funds available still in that improvement grant budget line item, that would be before the agency to decide whether or not they thought that was the value to spend those dollars on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just a caveat to address something I hear out of some of the commissioners sometimes is they'll talk about how urban renewal keeps some of the money out of the county. Also worth noting, the county has its own urban renewal district, and they haven't bothered to dissolve that, so they must not be too opposed.
So, and of all of these numbers, it's smaller than, it's 172K.
Yeah, it's very small.
It's small, yeah, compared to the city of Coos Bay and some of the other agencies.
Yeah. And I think I just have one last slide, which has just some minor kind of side thoughts that I thought were important to add. And we talked about this first one, is that establishment of an urban renewal district does not increase property taxes. It just changes the way that they are distributed from those taxing districts to the urban renewal agency. There are ways that your plan can be amended. However, it's a very prescribed process by ORS. It requires us to bring back those taxing districts for approval. If it was to be dissolved, if we meet that maximum indebtedness, we've not done a further amendment to increase that, and it's dissolved, sunsetted, those taxes now get distributed to those overlapping tax. There isn't a tax savings to the property owner. It stays at where they are at. It just goes to the overlapping taxing districts. And then again, we talked about the school districts ultimately not impacted because of the way this state school fund formula works.
Nicole, I can't remember the terminology when you can't, if we were to do another one, it gets to a point where, what is that called?
Compression.
Yes, thank you. Can you speak to compression?
So I can speak to that a little bit. So, and again, I apologize about this bit, but Measure 5 and Measure 50 put about certain limits on property taxes. One is that your property taxes can't increase greater than 3% per year, unless there is some major changes you did to your property. If you did some reconstruction, there would have been a reassessment. Those measures also establish permanent rates for all municipalities. And then the other bit with those is they established two pots, essentially a school or education pot, which is limited to $5, and then an other type of government, which is limited to $10. And so a total of $15 per thousand assessed value can be placed on properties. And so when you add up all of those permanent rates for those two entities, school districts, college would fit in there, can be no greater than $5. And all of the rest of the governments, all of our permanent tax rates cannot be greater than 10. And that, if it does go in excess of 5 or 10, then the county the assessor's office has to determine that difference, and all districts within that pot are compressed. They are reduced down to make sure that they are not being, those properties are not assessed in excess of that $10 or $5 pot. We have, there is not compression in the education pot currently. There is slight compression right now. All districts are seeing that compression in the governmental, non-education pot.
Okay, thank you. And if we wanted to make a change, we would have to get it approved by all of those, I think it was 9 taxing districts, is that correct? Or excuse me,
it
those
depends
9
on the type of
agencies.
change, and it doesn't require all, it requires 75% of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So there are conversations before.
Yes.
With the taxing districts that could be impacted.
Yes.
And in those conversations, have you ever found, since you've been city manager, I don't know if we've had to have those conversations, maybe with the MUPD or, I don't know.
So a couple times, actually, not since I've been city manager, but since I have been finance director, assistant, those kinds of things, we did a small amendment to the downtown that required communications to all the overlapping taxing districts, and so we spoke to them. We also had you have to do a presentation at the county. So that happened. And then we also did an amendment in Empire, and that was to increase both the acreage and the maximum indebtedness. We added some projects to that plan. Again, same thing. The conversations for Empire resulted in a little bit more challenge getting the school board to understand because again, let's remember, like, these seats are filled by members of the community, and you may not always have the background to understand things. And so the state school funding formula is really complicated, and having them understand that fully. Again, that same conversation came up when we talked about MUPD. It's a similar thing. It is asking, it's definitive. It says you can have property tax exemption if you meet these criteria for housing. We're looking specifically just for multifamily housing. There was, some concern that they would have to forego those dollars. It's 10 years, we're saying, but if not for that, I gave them an example, really rough, of all of the permanent rates of all of those districts you saw, and just on $1 million, because it's easy, nice round number, it's a little over $17,000 savings annually for 10 years, only at $1 million. I'm not sure, most projects are not going to come in at just $1 million. So you can see how having that savings could actually impact a developer being able to construct something. And once they can see those things and realize that they themselves also struggle to get staff on hand, of course they want to, participate in that.
And I was going to say the support has been there. There's not anybody that's ever said, no way, or fought it.
I mean, the only concern with the MUPD was just to ensure that, again, there's a requirement that a certain percentage of the overlapping taxing districts approve. So there was just a concern that all of them be made aware, and we absolutely want to do that. And I offered, once I make them all aware, and if I get any feedback and am allowed to go and discuss with those boards, I'm happy to come back and share that with all of the districts to know where they each stood.
And this was something, if I remember correctly, that came from the League of Oregon Cities. We've seen real success in Florence.
Yes.
And so we saw a lot of successful examples of this, and then it was brought to this council to consider.
Yeah. Specific to the MUPD, yes.
Yes.
Florence has had great success. And I would add to that, I just I was invited to participate this last week in a housing funding forum. Very specific to 4 projects that are happening in Coos County. And it was organized so that federal and state agencies were at one side of the table, and representatives for those 4 projects were on the other side. We each got opportunity to present on those projects, and then those organizations shared what funding opportunities they had. And 2 of the projects which happened to be in Coos Bay, Gloria Day Lutheran and the Inglewood School, the same developer involved in both commented on a project they did in Florence. If not for MUPD, they would not have done that project. So they've already acknowledged the benefit if we get that in place here.
That's great.
And we also can see how urban renewal dollars have impacted the downtown area pretty significantly. When you talk about the flagship coming into town, which is the Tioga, a big change in what people see when they come into the community.
And there are some interesting things so the annual report, basically requires us to give some financial details, but we actually provide any details on all the projects we funded in that year, some pictures and things like that. But there are some interesting details in the back that talks about the increase in assessed value, and you can see, Empire's almost doubled in the dollars that we spent out there. And we haven't experienced that across the city. That's a standout for Empire, for sure. So there is great benefit by us all pulling our dollars together to do that work.
So I would encourage everyone, if they want to do some light reading, to go on our website, and that annual report is there. It's one of my favorite reports because it really speaks to how those dollars make a significant impact in both of those districts. So
yeah, and we do at the very beginning. I mean, it's a little bit longer read than, there's pictures, so you can get through it with the pictures. But it does start out with kind of the same kind of conversation, explaining the benefits, how it works, how it gets started, starting an urban renewal agency, and then it goes into what have we done, and then at the very end, we're checking those ORS boxes. Here's the financial data we're telling you about.
Great. Any other comments from the council or Mayor Benetti?
Yeah, a few. So Nicole, if we have two areas, Coos Bay in the downtown area for URA and Empire. Those funds can't be used outside those districts, am I correct?
Correct. When we first established those plans, we set, those areas very specific to like streets. You could be in an area of Coos Bay, downtown or Empire, and on one side of the street, we've determined that is included in the urban renewal, and the other side is not. So it is very distinct areas that you can do urban renewal projects within.
And then another thing, so this council, when they were seated and elected in 2016, and I can reference the four of us, because we all four were seated and elected then, it was our goal to have economic development, and URA was one of those tools. And I can tell you from 2016 to today, there's been $190 million in development, economic development. And I think this is an important tool that help us get there. 165 million for commercial and 35 million for residential. So I think we should be pleased with what we've been able to accomplish. And that URA that we use for that piece of property for those 9-plex out there, Nicole, we generated 0 tax dollars, I believe. And today that development is generating $18,000 in taxes plus 9 units, so for people to live in. So anyway, some good success stories.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate all those stats. I'm going to write those down. Councilor Kilmer?
My favorite project so far was the Buggy Bank building one. We got to be creative and take the money. We had that developer that wanted to make 11 units in there for OHSU, had the contract already in hand, but traditional banks wouldn't provide the loan to build the thing that was clearly going to be paid for. So at urban renewal, we were able to provide that interim loan. 11 units got built for OHSU students, and we generated revenue because we charged interest. So that's my favorite so far. We get to be creative with it.
Yeah, and it supports the hospital, right? And we're always talking about housing for medical students and for faculty at the hospital. So another great project.
That developer today said that is the only reason that project went through was because of that particular ability to work with the agency and the city to think outside the box, really, because in so many other areas it's black and white. This is what he said, but he came, he had an idea, and staff worked with that idea and actually came up with a better thing, and it made a huge improvement to downtown as well.
Yeah. And they had another 11 units before that they were renting to do it, so it freed up 11 more working rate.
Yeah, I agree. None of this could be done without the very creative and talented staff here at the city. So, as always, thank you. That wraps up our agenda items. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Christine, I don't know if we have any tonight. Maybe we do. Okay, great. Why don't we start with Sammy from the library? Sammy, because you're staff, I will tell everyone else you have 3 minutes and I'll read something, but because you're staff, I'll just let you give a report before
I won't
go
take
down
that long, I
road.
promise. I just put a bookmark next to all your places. We are currently doing a survey of the services that the library provides, and I encourage everyone to take the survey, and I'll leave some bookmarks in the back. You can take them online. You can take it in paper. Just stop by the library. There's a QR code. There's a tiny URL. We are making it available however you need it. So I encourage everyone in the city and service area to take this and give us some feedback on our services.
That's awesome, Sammy. And you did that in less than 3 minutes. Well done, you. In regards to public comment, I just want to remind the citizens that the public comment period is designed for topics not already included on the agenda and is intended for the public to share ideas and concerns. It is not intended for an interactive discussion with council. There may be opportunities for public comments during specific agenda items, and members of the public are requested to confine the remarks to questions or issues under discussion during this time. During any designated comment period, individuals shall not engage in personal attacks, shall not impugn the motives of any speaker, and shall at all times while in session conduct themselves in an appropriate manner. No person shall make personal, impertinent, slanderous, or unauthorized remarks or become boisterous while addressing the council. If such person does participate in any of the above listed, they may be asked to leave. So with that said, Dean, would you please come up? And you have 3 minutes. So could you please give us your name and the city that you reside in?
Council President, because we do have some other people here, we put the agenda, we added an agenda item for the reports in case people wanted to have any comments on that. So they are able to comment on what was given in that report, Devereaux Center. Make public comment, they didn't?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. I don't have a comment for the Devereaux Center, but I do want to promote the
Dean,
library.
Dean, forgive me. I want you to come a little bit closer,
uh,
and I want you to tell us, even though I know who you are, and what city you reside in.
Dean Lundy, I reside in Empire.
Okay, and Dean, you will get 3 minutes, and our city attorney, Nate, will let you know when you're at the 1 minute mark.
Thank
And
you.
then it's important to use the mics, just because the folks online can't really hear. That's how they get their sound.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dean Lundy, I represent the Divine Nature Academy. We are into safe bicycle stuff. One of the guys read the proclamation in English. We're in contact with this guy, John Lazur, with the state to try and get involved with their corridor thing. We're trying to pick up the where they left off in 217 with the waterfront corridor. But what I wanted to say this evening is I found a fabulous city had a mission statement. 5 reasons to obtain permits. That's not it. The mission of the city of Coos Bay, that's this city, is to work as a stable, progressive municipality to enhance the quality of life for all citizens through a government that is accessible to everyone and dedicated to the development of a diversified economy, sound fiscal planning, and the preservation and enhancement of the cultural, historical, and natural beauty of our area. I'm all for you guys, any way I can help, and any way you can steer me to connect safe bike paths along we're working on the waterfront. We own almost 1,000 feet of it, so we're one little chunk, but we're trying to connect the dots, and there's no walkway, actually, for almost 3 miles. The street has 3 names: Tremont, North Bayshore Boulevard, and Highway 101. It's the corridor, and I feel that beautiful plaza, the Starbucks and that beautiful plaza, we can kind of, if we could get a couple crosswalks tied in with the stoplight, you know, it's a 2-year plan, but if we can get a couple crosswalks to not get killed going across, we could have a beautiful experience. Thank you very much.
Dean, thank you for your comments. The next public comment is from Mike. Mike, you have been with us before, so if you will give us your first and your last name and what city you reside in, please.
Mike Powder, I reside in Coos Bay, Empire area. And good news, the 101, the speed limit has been dropped from 45 to 35, which I think is fantastic. I've heard a lot of complaints. I've heard people say it caused traffic jams and accidents by lowering the speed limit, which is sort of nuts. But anyway, that's to me is a good start, because 101, you know, if we can connect the boardwalks going again, and if ever we could see that happening, it'll make 101 will be a safe street to cross and to bike on and all that sort of good stuff. The other one I'm constantly looking at is, because I live in Empire, is getting down into Coos Bay, especially during market time and stuff. It's a deadly run, and it's going to be my focus. The Y Marina area around there is a disaster. People cross all over the place. That, of course, is where the Devereaux Center is. The bike lane disappears when you're going towards the water. So you have to run the gauntlet. You know, if cars aren't going to kill you, the homeless drug addicts might. So it's the only way in and out. It's a bottleneck that needs addressing. The whole of Ocean Boulevard is, 40 miles an hour is too fast. Especially coming in tonight, I passed 2 cyclists. They weren't well lit or anything else like that, but they're in a 40-mile zone in darker clothes, coming down there in this sort of light. It's a danger. You know, we're lucky more people haven't been killed. I think the only reason people haven't been killed is because too many people are too scared to get on the road and ride the bikes. So that's what it's with, and so I'm definitely all for, with Dean and all these guys, on connecting the boardwalks, getting ourselves some good, safe bike routes, you know, safe city. The more people we get out on the streets, the better the streets are going to become. You know, at the moment I see, you know, a lot of homeless and stuff like that. There's a lot more homeless in downtown Coos coming in. I'm seeing all these people out there. I feel sorry for them, but there's something that's, you know, it's got to be addressed by. But that's not what we're here for. We'd just like to see better sidewalks, crosswalks, slower speeds, a safer city, so we can get on our bikes and get around. 1 minute. And I was at my doctor's office this morning and talking bikes. He's all for it, and he does what I do. When we want to go for a decent bike ride, we load up our bikes and we go to Eugene. They got fantastic bike routes over there, you know. And you know, so there are people within the city that will actually blow the dust off their bikes and start using it, you know. And the more people that do it, the more people will like it. Tourists, I've talked to many tourists. They leave their bikes attached to their RVs. They don't want to get their bikes off. They save it for the next place they're going. Anyway, that's me tonight. Thank you.
Mike, thank you for your comments. Appreciate them.
You're welcome.
I don't think there are any other comments this evening. So with that said, if there are no comments from council or Mayor Benetti, any comments from you, Mayor Benetti?
No, thank you.
Okay, then I will, I do have a comment from Councilor Kilmer.
I just wanted to make sure and remind folks that on Thursday we have the Livability Committee is meeting, and that's a good place we're still developing that committee, and who will be on that. That's not been ratified by the council, but we have a couple of agenda items that I think might be of interest to folks. It is a public meeting, so it is available on Zoom, and so right now the meeting is at noon on Thursday, the last Thursday of the month.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Kilmer. With that said, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.